Hello, my name is Carol Garbodin Murray, and I am happy to introduce you to Illuminating Care, the Pedagogy and Practice of Care, which was published by Exchange Press in 2021. I wrote this book while working alongside babies and toddlers and preschoolers and directing programs for young children because I was so fascinated with what happens when we live life alongside children, how much of our time we spend in caring rituals. I just think it's fascinating to consider these enormous milestones, this gigantic journey that children are on between the ages of 0 and 5. These pathways of learning that involve care rituals, learning to regulate their bodies, learning when they're tired, when they're awake, how to modulate, how to control their internal systems, learning when they're satiated, when they're hungry, how to develop a relationship with food after you've just come from breast or bottle, how children come to understand their worthiness, how they become empathetic, how they become thinkers, all through this engagement, this interaction that we have with them while we're caring for them. And care is a gigantic part of our work. I think that the thing that really kind of sparked my writing, though, was the questions I was asking because of this provocation in hearing the way people in our field and people in society misunderstood care, the way that care was not readily talked about. As I was becoming an early childhood educator, I learned a lot about literacy and math and numeracy and social skills, but I didn't really learn a lot about care. And so, as I invite you into this book, I ask you to think about your understanding of care. When I was writing the book, I had people ask me, "What are you writing about?" And I would say, "I'm writing about care." And it was always interesting to see the response. People would be like, "What do you mean? Like childcare? Like toilet training? Like things that you care about? Like being a caring person? What do you mean by care?" And yes, this book is about all those things. But the more we analyze care, the deeper and the more fascinating this field becomes. Care can be a burden. We're burdened with care. If you're an early childhood educator who has to change 10 diapers in the morning, you might feel that care is a burden. And then care can be so purposeful, so meaningful when you support a child who's learning how to become independent, who's engaged in a care ritual, and you have a part in partnering with them and seeing their growth and helping them reach their full potential. Care can slide all the way down the scale from burdensome to joyful. Care is all those things. Care has been treated poorly in our field, in our past. Care is linked to domestic labor, to slavery, and we've experienced this split in education and care, which I call a false dichotomy. So, as we're thinking about how we conceptualize care, I wanted to tell you that I think care goes perfectly with the mission of defending the early years, because defending the early years is all about honoring childhood, about celebrating what it means to be a child, about letting kids be kids, defending the child's right to play. And I feel the same thing is happening with care. All of my life, I've been told, don't talk about care. You are more than care. You are an educator. People will think less of you if you call your school a child care center. You should call it a learning center. This is kind of like what we heard about care, maybe I would say 20 years ago when we were play. 20 years ago when we were advocating for play, people would say, don't call it play, call it like developmentally appropriate practice, call it activity-based instruction, call it experiential learning, call it the curriculum block, call it center time, call it choice time. Don't call it play because no one will respect you if you call it play. But those of us who were advocating for play named play. We can talk about play as developmentally appropriate practice and play as research and learning, but we kept naming play because play has a central purpose in the child's life, and play is the child's right. And I feel that same way about care. In my career, in my lifetime, people have said, don't say care, call it social emotional learning. It is social emotional learning, but it's more than that. Don't call it care. Call it relationship based, call it responsive caregiving. It is all those things. But in my work, I am hoping that you will join me in our work of care. You will join me in finding new ways to talk about care and lift up care without adopting someone else's language, using the language that honors childhood and that honors the work that we do. I wanted to tell you about Nell Noddings. When I finished the book, I had the opportunity to call her because she was one of the people who inspired me so much as I was analyzing and thinking about care. And as I was so excited to find there is this philosophy of care called care ethics. And Nell is a woman who wrote over 20 books on care. She is also a mother of 10 children. She had 5 of her own and 5 adopted children. And she was a professor at Stanford. And so as I was finishing the book, I sent her an email and thinking that it would reach her in California. And she wrote back to me and said, hey, I actually live here in New Jersey. And why don't you come have lunch with me? So me and my friend, uh, colleague, Lynette, went to Nell's house for lunch. It was such an honor to meet this woman who is the quintessential care mentor. And here she is in her library. We were explaining to Nell how we have a hard time talking about care in our field, how it's often assumed, how it's associated with a woman's place, a woman's work, how it's invisible, how it's diminished, how it is separate from education. Even those of us who work in early childhood, who care for the youngest children, still have a hard time naming and illuminating care. And Nell told us that we should not just talk about care because we're early childhood educators and we want to take good care of little children, but we should also talk about care because it is the backbone of human strength. It's a model of how to live our life. It's a philosophy, it's an ethic. And I got goosebumps when she said that, and it helped me think about how I wanted to define care. I wanted people to see this multifaceted, dynamic definition of care. That first of all, care starts with an action. And when I say action, I want to examine this labor of care, this action, this physical encounter that brings us close to a child, close to one another. I want to acknowledge the maintenance and labor of care. Care is an action. And then secondly, I wanted to analyze how care is an attitude. How do we approach the other? How do we show that we care? What are some of the behaviors that reveal our attitude, our pace, our tone of voice, our presence, these things that are sometimes hard to describe. What is our attitude to care? And lastly, care is an ethic, that care connects us to all humans. And the basic premise of the ethic of care is that we are always interdependent. We are always connected, that dependency is a human condition. We need each other, and that is not a weakness. Nail said that because you're working at the beginning of life, because you're an early childhood educator, you are at the nucleus of care. You are the original care. And I love thinking about that, that we who work with young children have a unique perspective, that we have this front row seat, this model of human interaction and dependency. How do we become care mentors, care experts, care ambassadors in our community? Is the question I ask myself. And we always say that early childhood education is a unique time of life, right? In many ways, those of us who are defending play, who are defending the early years, we want to be kind of cut off from the public school or the big kids because we are tired of being told that we have to use the language of academia, that we have to use those categories of learning that fit into a school model. We want to say that education for the young child is different, and care is an essential component of educating young children. Care has this ability to help us claim our unique identity in early childhood education. I think that care should be a unique component all the way up. The way we treat and interact with people and children when they're in middle school or high school too. But in early childhood, we cannot deny children must be cared for, and caring for them with dignity, with respect, caring for them as an honor, as a pedagogy, is very different from caring for them as if care is drudgery, as if care is less than learning. I wanted to quickly tell you about the way I organized this book. I didn't want to use categories that we usually um, land on when we're talking about psychology and education. I didn't want to use hierarchies, and I was struggling with an image or a way to organize the concepts of care. And I happened to come across a book called The Seven Lamps of Architecture. And I thought, that's it. 7 lamps, lights, lanterns. Let's organize care around this idea of illumination, of light, because the theme we keep finding as we study care and think about our care practices is that care has been hidden. So let's illuminate it. And the first lamp of care is that care is education, that we want to break away from this false dichotomy that there is educating and there is caring. We want to say care is education. They're inseparable. Think about everything the child is learning while they are getting their little bodies in the chair to sit at the table, to hold the fork, to chop the apple, to get the food to their mouth. We feel good when we see a child like holding a pencil and writing their name, but think about all the wonderful learning opportunities that are right in front of us as we live alongside children when we have meals and snack with them. And we can look at all the care rituals and show that care is learning, care is education, care is an intellectual exchange. And care is a right. Children should not have to earn care. We have to change this paradigm that kids need to be trained, toilet training, and more that children are on a learning journey, a learning path, toilet learning, that their body is their own, that we cannot bribe and train and coerce children in care rituals. Care is a right. The third lamp is that care is a partnership. And we have these wonderful care mentors and models like Magda Gerber, like Emmy Pickler, who have taught us that the best models for caring are caring with children, not caring to children. Think about the difference of having a care relationship with another that is empowering, not power over. In the partnership, I think so much about the ethics that are required of from those of us who care, because care partnerships often represent an asymmetrical relationship. One person is vulnerable. One person needs something, a baby, a toddler, a preschooler. They need our care. An elderly person needs our care. There's neediness. So when someone is vulnerable and we are in a care partnership, we do not see that vulnerability as weakness. We see it as humanness. And we who are caring must have the ethics to care with dignity and respect and partner with the other. Caring isn't something that anyone can do well. Caring requires an intelligence, respect, dignity, knowledge. Caring is a partnership. The next lamp of care, I think we're on number 4, is care as bodily. And I just think it's so essential that we talk about the body because, again, that false dichotomy that education is of the mind and anything of the body is custodial or it's lower or it's less important. And we know that we are integrated humans and care work involves respecting the body of the child and respecting the body of the caregiver, of the educator. Children delight in their body. Their body is their own. This is a sensory experience. No wonder children always remember how they felt at nap time, how they felt at snack time, because the senses are heightened. Learning is also heightened during care rituals because of this wonderful aspect of integration with the body. The mind manifests through the body. Care is bodily. Care is an art, and care is improvisational, right? We all do it differently. We are all interpreting. So, what a vast, wild, wonderful frontier we're on as we explore how we can each care in our own way. And sometimes when I think about care as an art, I think, people think, oh, it's pretty or it's beautiful, and it becomes this like this image of Pinterest, and sometimes care is those things. Sometimes it is beautiful, and I love materials of care. I love tablecloths and napkins and cups and lovely materials, but the art of care is often invisible. Like I said before, it's in our attitude, our tone of voice, our pace. And that beauty that care holds is not always beautiful. It can be hard, challenging, messy, right? Art is not always fun to look at. The process can be very, very difficult. So care is not perfect. Care is all these things, challenging and beautiful. Care is an art. And then care is a science. We cannot deny the brain science that tells us that all these beautiful imagery studies that say human relationship, eye contact, tone of voice, touch is what heightens the child's awareness, is what connects the child to his own thinking, to their own worthiness, to their own processes. Responsive caregiving, the science is on our side, that children need to be cared for with tender, responsive, thoughtful human interactions. And when I talk about the science, I also like to think about like a lot of the things that we do naturally, those of us who care, we sing to the baby. And now the science will tell us how essential lullabies and singing are to the child's understanding of language and communication. We bounce babies on our knees, and now the science will tell us, that that's really supporting their neurodevelopment and their core strength. And there's just so many natural, ancient, historical care practices that we have engaged that we can say yes. We have inherited these care practices, and the science tells us this is what kids need. And then with science, we also have to be open to challenging ourselves, because a lot of what we inherited, for example, if you inherited the belief that you must clean everything on your plate, um, or that you must eat all of your peas before you can have another serving of food, or that children must be trained to be toilet trained by the time before they're 18 months. Some of these things that we've inherited don't really fit with the science. So we look to nutritionists, we look to pediatrician, we look to occupational therapy, we look to speech therapy, we look for the best science we can find in human development and child rearing and child care to improve our practice, to continually grow. Care as a science. And the last lamp of care is that care is what makes us human. And I think, there's someone called Emma Downing who said that she just wrote a book a few years ago called The Care Crisis. And she said that the quickest, most intimate way to a meaningful conversation with someone is to ask them who they're caring for. We are all caring for or being cared for all the time. And as early childhood educators, we can cast a broader net and we can join this care movement of people who are in tune with what it means to be cared for and caring for elders, what it means to be assisting people with disabilities, what it means to see the vulnerable as human and whole. Care is our strength. Care is what makes us human. Rosalind Carter said there are 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who need caregiving. And sometimes we are simultaneously all these things. I am I just read a book by Elisa Strauss, because more and more people are reading and writing and researching care than ever before. And this is a quote from her, not the one on the screen, but the one I'm going to read to you. It says, "I liked caregiving because it was big, a galaxy of knotted entanglements, and I was in awe of the bigness. I felt compelled to explore it. I wanted to say that caring for another person is like a hero's journey, a transformative experience." That's Elisa Strauss from When You Care. And that's how I want to end this invitation, this to illuminating care with you. I want to take this hero's journey with all of you as we find ways to illuminate care in our work as early childhood educators. I invite you to join me in a self-study and a reflective practice as we illuminate care. I invite you to use this book to shine a light on your practice as we seek new ways to unite education and care, to name the care that is embedded in our important work as teachers of the youngest citizens in our community. I invite you to imagine what we can do if we rescue care from the confines of the undervalued, unappreciated realm where it has been hidden. I invite you to imagine a new pedagogy, the pedagogy of care. Thank you so much for joining me in illuminating care in our world. I'm looking forward to talking more with you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
I hope you are ready to join Carol for this amazing book study. We at Defending the Early Years are thrilled that as a national advisor, Carol has agreed to support our fundraising efforts by donating her time for this book study. For $25, you will participate in 4 90-minute Zoom discussions led by Carol and co-moderated with Denisha Jones. All funds from DEY book studies and other programming support the DEY Summer Institute and other events. Scholarships are available for anyone who needs assistance. Please click on the registration link or scan the QR code to register today.